This lesson is over the surface area of pyramids and cones. The objective, students will be able to find surface area of various pyramids with regular bases and cones. Now, the only reason I put regular bases in here doesn't really affect you guys much, but just to make myself feel better. You can't do these formulas if the bases are not regular. And what I mean by regular is all the angles and all the sides are congruent. So of the base of these pyramids, all the sides and all the angles have to be congruent. If they're not, then you have to use something else that's a little bit more difficult. So I just wanted to specify that, but really you guys don't need to know that at all. I'm not going to give you any of them that aren't like that. So the formula is the same variables we're used to. We have the base area and the perimeter. The only difference is now we have this L, that is the slant height. Now the slant height is perpendicular to one of the edges. So the actual height would be straight down and go right into the center of your base, and it's perpendicular to that center of your base. That would be how tall it is. So if you would say, how tall is that pyramid? That's the actual height. The slant height is if you slide down the edge of your pyramid and go right to the right down to the side. So I guess if you were standing on top of a pyramid, if you would dig a hole straight down to the bottom, that's the actual height. But if you would slide down the side until you got to the ground, that's the slant height. So it's the same formula or the same steps as we used before that we use with prisms. Obviously, I should have put pyramids here. The only difference is there's this extra step where we have to find the slant height unless they give it to you, so it kind of depends. So find the surface area of the following pyramid. The very first step, find the base and what shape it is, then find the area of the base, find the perimeter of the base, then the slant height. So the base is a square. So the area of a square is the side length squared. The perimeter of a square is 4 times the side length. So the next step is find the area of the base. Well, the area is the side length, which is 5 squared. So the area is 25. Then the perimeter we just said was 4 times the side length. So 4 times 5 is 20. Now I guess I should probably specify this is 25 centimeters squared and 20 centimeters squared, because, or sorry, 20 centimeters, because the first one is the area. The third step, sorry, the second step is the area, the third step is the perimeter, so it's just centimeters. Then the step 4 is finding the slant height. Well, the good news is the slant height, they give that to us for this one. Again, if you slide down the side, it's perpendicular with this edge here, so that's the slant height. So now all we have to do is plug it into our formula. So our surface area is the base area plus 1/2 perimeter times slant height. The base of this one, or sorry, the base area is 25. Perimeter is 44. Why did I put 44? Sorry. Perimeter is 20. And the slant height is 9.3. Now you can do this separately, and you can do this first and then add the 25. Personally, if I were you, I'm just going to put this whole thing in my calculator just like I see it. Just make sure it's 25 plus. I've made this mistake a lot of times where I put multiplication when I put it in my calculator. So 25 plus 0.5 times 20 times 9.3 should give you 118, and it's the surface area, so it should be centimeters squared. It's still an area, so it's still squared. The next one, find the surface area of this pyramid. So this one, the base is a square again. We could also have triangles. We could also have hexagons, pentagons. So the area of this one is 11 squared, so that's 121. Centimeters squared, again, that's an area, so it's squared. The perimeter is 4 times 11, so that's 44 centimeters. It's not an area, so it's not squared. Then this is where it gets a little bit more difficult. We need the slant height, and they do not give it to us. This is the actual height. The slant height would go down to one of the edges. So the easiest way to do that is imagine if you're standing over here and you're looking straight at this pyramid. If you're looking straight at the side, instead of looking like a pyramid, you're going to look kind of at the silhouette, and it's going to look like a triangle. Well, then this goes straight down, so that is going to be right here, and that is 12 centimeters. And then we know our whole base is 11 centimeters. Now, we're going to use the Pythagorean theorem by making this into a right triangle, and then we're going to be able to find this hypotenuse as our slant height. Now, the only other thing you have to realize is the base, the whole thing, is 11. We only want to use this part of it, and that ends up being perfectly half of that. So half of 11 is 5.5. So that is what you're using. This is the right triangle we're looking at. So to find the slant height, you end up with a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So my a squared, it doesn't matter which one is which. So I'll start with 12. Plus 5.5 squared is equal to my slant height squared. And again, the good news for this one is that everything on the left-hand side is all numbers we know. They're not variables. So I can just punch this in my calculator. 12 squared plus 5.5 squared. I can do that all in one step. That's 174.25 is equal to L squared. And now take the square root of both sides. Don't forget to do that. That ends up being 13.20 centimeters. So 13.20 centimeters. So that, and again, that I think is the hardest part of this lesson is finding the slant height. Because other than that, it's just plugging numbers into our formula. So we have the base area plus 1/2 the perimeter times the slant height. And again, if I were you, I would just put that straight into my calculator. 121 plus 0.5 times 44 times 13.20. Again, make sure you're making it plus. That ends up being 411.4 centimeters squared. Again, it's an area, so it's still squared. So go ahead and do this one on your own. The only difference with this one is the base is a triangle. Now, it might be hard to pick which base you're going to use for this one. The easiest thing is to use this one as your base. And the reason I use that is because I know the base, and then they tell me the height of that triangle, so it's easier to find the area of that one. But go ahead and do this one on your own. Pause the video, do this one on your own. When you're finished, hit play, and make sure you have the right answer. So my first step is the base is a triangle. My second step, so the area is 1/2 base times height. And when I say, remember, base times height, I'm talking about the base of the triangle. So if you're just looking at this triangle here, the base of that is 7 feet. The height of that is at 6.1. So again, put that in your calculator. That ends up giving us 21.35 as my area, feet squared. And my next step is the perimeter. Well, again, it's got to be irregular, so each one of these are the same, each one of those sides. So the perimeter is 7 plus 7 plus 7, which ends up being 21. And then we need our slant height. Luckily, our slant height for this one, they give it to us. Again, it goes down to an edge here. So that slant height is 5.4. So last but not least, plug that into our formula. My base area plus the perimeter. Oops, plus 1/2 times the perimeter. That's close. Times 5.4. Now again, this 1/2, I always write it as 1/2, and I say it as 1/2. That's what the formula is. But when I put it in my calculator, I would just use 0.5. I think that's easiest. I guess the yellow calculators have a fraction button, so you could try that, but mine doesn't have a fraction button. This ends up being 78.05 feet squared. And again, make sure when you put it in your calculator, you're putting a plus right there. I put multiplication by accident several times, and I miss it, so I'm double checking all that. So now we're going to move on to a cone. Now remember, the cone is literally the exact same formula as a pyramid. Base plus 1/2 perimeter times the height. Times the slant height. The only thing you have to remember is that the formula for the area of a circle is pi r squared, so that's why they put that here. And then the perimeter for a circle is the circumference. Well, the circumference is 2 times pi times the radius, then times L. Well, 1/2 times 2 cancels, so you just have pi r times L. So that's where they get pi r times L. Now again, that's just something to hopefully help you memorize it. But you guys get formula sheets for all this stuff, so you don't really have to know that as long as you know how to use this formula. So find the surface area of this cone. You could try to do all the 5 steps like we did before. I would just use that formula. So we have pi r squared plus pi r L. Double check. So the only thing we need is the r in the slant height. Again, they give us the slant height, so that makes this one nice. So we have pi times 4 squared plus pi times 4 times 6. Now again, you could do this differently. You could do this part and then this part if you wanted to, and then add them. That might not be a bad idea. You can also put this all in your calculator. You just have to make sure you're putting it in correctly. So pi multiplied by 4 squared plus pi times 4 times 6, even if you put it in with the multiplication symbols. So even if you just type in, like in my calculator, I just put in pi multiplied 4 squared plus pi multiplied 4 multiplied 6, your calculator knows the order of operation. So that you can go ahead and do. You end up getting 125.66. Now you could also find your answer in terms of pi, which means when you're done, you have something that's like 13 pi. If you wanted to do that, we just have to do 4 squared is 16, so we have 16 pi, plus 4 times 6 is 24, so 24 pi. Since they're both in terms of pi, we can add those together, 16 plus 24. So your answer would be 40 pi. Now, on the calculators, you guys use the yellow calculators. A lot of times, even when you put this in, it'll come out as this is your answer. All you have to do is right above the enter button, there's a button that looks like this that has these 2 little triangles. That button changes all of your pi into a decimal. It changes fractions into decimals, changes radicals to decimals. So whichever way you want to do it, it's completely fine. I personally like the decimals. I think the pi, sometimes it's easier, but then it's a little bit tricky because we haven't done it very often. So do this one on your own, and again, the big hint right there is that 12 is not the slant height. So again, we're looking for this length here. So go ahead, pause it, do this one on your own. So the radius is 5, the height is 12. So we have 5 squared plus 12 squared is equal to my slant height squared. That's 25 plus 144 is equal to my slant height squared. 25 plus 144 is 169. The last step, take the square root of both sides, you end up getting 13. So that's your slant height. Now we can plug it into our formula. So we have pi times my radius is 5 squared plus pi times my radius times my slant height. And again, not a bad idea to double check, make sure you plug everything in right, because I have definitely made that mistake before. Make sure you're using the right formula. So we have pi times 5 squared plus pi times 5 times 13. Ends up giving me 282.74. And again, this is centimeters squared. I don't know if I labeled my last one, but that's okay. So a couple story problems. The biggest pyramid in Giza, Egypt is about 4,500 years old. We decided to give it a facelift and paint the whole thing. Each side of the square base of the pyramid is 755 feet. From the base straight up to the point is 480 feet. How much paint would you need to cover the pyramid, including the base? We're also painting the bottom. So my pyramid looks something like this. And the biggest thing is that it's 480 feet tall. That's not the slant height. So I have 480. And then it gives me the base is each 755, and it says it's a square base. So we know it's a square base, so the base area, and again, if you want to label this as step 1, step 2, step 3, it's not a bad idea to stay organized. Step 1, I guess, is that it's a square base. So we have 755 squared. Now, you will get some really big numbers with this, but don't be intimidated by that because you're using a calculator. It's completely fine to have big numbers here. My step 3 is my perimeter, which is 4 times 755. Same thing we did earlier. And then, unfortunately, with this one, we have to find the slant height again. So, again, if you're looking at this pyramid, I know that this is 480. Yeah. And then the whole thing is 755, so we're going to divide that by 2. So we just need 377.5. So again, we're going to have some pretty big numbers here, but that's okay. 480 squared plus 377.5 squared is equal to L squared. Again, I'm just putting that in my calculator. 480 squared plus 377.5 squared. That is 372,906.25. And don't forget the last step, we need to take the square root of both of those. So you're getting 610.66 for the slant height. So now the hard part's done. Now we just need to plug it into our formula. So we have the base area is 5, I don't know if I'll be able to fit it here. Let's do this. So my base area is 5,70025 plus 1/2 times my perimeter, which is 3020, times the slant height, which is 610.66. And again, now we can just put that in our calculator. 5,70025 plus 0.5 times 3020 times 610.66. You're going to getting 1492121. 1492121.6. I don't know if I said that right the first time. And that is feet squared. Now go ahead and do this one on your own. This one's a lot easier. It's a lot less wordy. And this one, the first one, they kind of describe you a whole scenario. And this one, it's just a picture. So it's just a cone. So go ahead, pause this, do it on your own. Surface area of a cone. Oh, this one's a little bit different. They give you the surface area of the cone. If the radius is 13, find the slant height. So for a cone, the surface area is pi r squared plus pi rl. They give us the radius is 13, so it's pi times 13 squared plus pi times 13 times L. They don't give us the slant height, but they do give us the surface area is 1719.4. Now this is where if you leave your answers in terms of pi, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. So go ahead and simplify this. 13 squared times pi is 530.93. 13 times pi is 40.84 times their slant heights, and then 1719.4. So from here, it's just an algebra 1 question now. So we solve this just like a 2-step equation. Subtract 530.93. 1719.4 minus 530.93. 1188.47. And now divide by 40.84. That gives me 29.10. And this is the slant height, so it's just feet. It's not squared because it's just the height. It's not an area. So if you have any questions, make sure you let me know. You can always email me or stay after class.